we're going to start talking about the listing agreement. And it's not, we have multiple listing agreements.
We don't have that.
No, you don't. I'm sorry. I can show you where to get all this stuff afterwards. But this is the checklist for the listing agreement. And you will see that in terms of the agreement itself, it's general. And the reason being is we have one listing agreement for one checklist for all different listings. So you might have a listing agreement for land, you might have a listing agreement for a mobile home, you might have a listing agreement for, actually I think most of the rest are into here now. It used to be we had a ton of listing agreements and we're slowly cutting them down. So this kind of gives you a checklist of what you're going to need, and then these are some of the additional documents, and we'll be talking about them as we go through the class. And then these are, if the listing is different, there are some additional documents that you'll be looking for. Okay.
And the numbers and the letters that are beside it.
The numbers, the way all my checklists work is everything that is a listing is what I call the 100 series. Okay, if you see a document there that's 100, you know it's a listing. If it's a 200 series, you know it's part of the purchase agreement or the contract for the purchase. If it's 300 series, it goes to the MCA department. That's all to do with MCA. 400 series would be all your disclosures, inspections, escrow instructions, and that sort of stuff. Okay. And then there's the 500 series is 3 documents that are used at the tail end for closing. Okay? So I will show you after the class exactly how to get to this, because it's actually, I send this to you every Monday to show where to go with that. Okay. The second part is a property profile. All right. Is everyone set up with a title company so that you have access to their website and you can look up the property profile for every property in Los Angeles County? If you're not, talk to one of the team leaders, and they'll show you how. They'll give you some suggestions of people. Basically, you go to a title officer and you say, hey, I need to have access. So like First American, Fidelity, that sort of thing. And then what that does is you do a search by APN or address, and it brings up the profile of the property. And the reason you need this, especially you need it when you're doing a listing, you need this before you go to a listing appointment, is that you need to know who the owner of the property is. All right? You need to know, you need to confirm the APN number, because you may have looked it up by address. You now know the exact APN number. And so that and then the address, this address is basically what the assessor's office has, all right? And it should be darn close to what you'll find when you go in to actually enter your listing in the MLS. It'll pick it up from here, all right? So those 3 items are very important. The name, it's fine up to 2 names, okay? If there's 3 owners, 4 owners, it's going to cut it off, and you're only going to see 2. But you'll find out more when you get into your listing appointment. But that's a question you always want to know. You want to know, are there any other owners than just the 2 that I'm picking up here, or even the 1? Okay? Because sometimes what happens is people will record, or they'll create a quitclaim deed to add someone to title, somebody they'll add their child or something like that. But they won't get it recorded. And if it doesn't get recorded, the recorder doesn't know about it, and it's not going to show up here. So that would be an additional conversation. Say, You really need to get this recorded, because otherwise, we're gonna be going in to escrow, and escrow's gonna think there's only one seller. If the seller is a trust, if the people that own this property own it in a trust, again, it gets a little hard to read, but what you're gonna pick up is you're gonna pick up a name and you're gonna see the letters TR. As soon as you see TR, you go, okay, it's owned as a trust. Add this to my checklist of things to do when I have my listing appointment, to find out about the trust, who's in the trust, who has to sign for it, okay? And then you don't need to go into, well, I need a copy of your trust right now, but at the point in time that they've signed your listing agreement and now you're going into disclosures, at that point in time, you want to have them start searching out the trust. Because most people don't have their trust sitting in a file cabinet and know exactly where it is. It's on a shelf somewhere. We created it. I don't remember where it is. Okay. So it's something you need, and the reason you need it is because escrow is going to need that document before they can open escrow, because they need to know who is actually selling the house and who can sell the house. Okay.
If they can't find the document, how do you go back and get it?
If they can't find it, I've never run into that, but I think that would be a question you'd go and you'd ask your escrow question, your escrow company, what do I do? We can't find this document. So it may be that portions of it or enough of it are recorded, but I'm not sure. So I don't want to jump and say, oh yeah, I mean, realistically, the best thing to do is find whoever created the trust. Go back to them. So the attorney that created the trust would be your first question.
They'll probably have a copy of it.
Yes. I would hope they do.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Does this apply for mobile home as well?
Technically not, but yes. I don't think many mobile homes are put into a trust.
Not meaning a mobile home, but I'm meaning to the property profile, they're able to find all information from title as well for a mobile home?
If it's in a park, it's hit and miss when you get it, but you should try it. You should try to look it up.
If not through the DMV?
Yeah, that's why it gets hard, because you may pick up the mobile home park itself, but each specific unit.
Yeah, if it's not a foundation.
Right. Correct. But now remember, if it's a mobile home on a piece of land that's being sold with the land, it's a single family, and it will be, and you will have it listed. Okay? It'll be tied to the ABN. All right, and then the other things that the property profile will help you at as you're getting ready for your listing appointment is that this is going to confirm the year that it was built. If the numbers are the same, that means there was never any major renovation. If you have a secondary number, say you had 91 in 2001, that means that probably there was a major disaster to the house, like a fire. And there was enough of the house that had to be rebuilt that when the permitting process went in, the building department went and sent the assessor's department information saying this house has been rebuilt and really now confirms to the code of 2001. Okay. So as far as the date you use for listing, I would go ahead and use the early date, but then in your agent remarks say this house was totally rebuilt after a fire in 2001. Okay. And seller has additional information if you need. Okay. So, square footage of the house, this number should match what you're putting in the MLS and what comes up in the MLS, which I'm kind of stepping ahead because you need to get the sellers to sign up with you first, but this is a confirmation of that. Then you're looking at 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms in this house. Now let's say that this showed 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. Okay, and then you walk in the house, and there's 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. All right, and it's a single-story property, and you can see it looks like maybe a new room or 2 was added. what you're gonna do now is that's gonna be a question for the seller. Did you do a remodel? Did you add the extra bedroom and bath? If they say it was that way when I bought it, okay, fine. Did you get any information about permitting? And realistically, it's just, if they don't have any information, then they probably won't, don't get too worried about it. But then you're gonna wanna put in the exit remarks that buyer to verify permits for the additional bedroom and bath that do not show, okay? The other thing that happens is that the square footage now is probably gonna be more than this, all right? If it's not showing up here, it's probably not permitted. That's a simple fact. So you're gonna want the buyers to verify that, and if the square footage, let's say the seller says, yeah, these rooms were added, and the square footage is actually 3,000 square feet. You can't put in that it's 3,000 square feet from the assessor, but you can in the MLS, you can list it at 3,000 square feet, and the source of your information is the seller, all right? So, and then if they're doing that, again, you're going to let the buyer know in the MLS, and you're probably going to do an addendum also to let them know. You want to push this all onto the buyer and make sure the buyer is doing their research, investigations onto the permits on this house. Okay? That's a little more detailed than you need at the very beginning, but I wanted to just kind of let you know what the property profile will do. All right? So, but the first thing you're going to do when you're getting ready to do a listing is you're going to pull a property profile. That is your starting point every time. Okay? All right, now we're going to go back to, okay. So, now, just as with the RPA and every listing, every contract that we have, you're going to have two agencies. You're going to have the AD, which basically says, and now because today we're talking as a seller's agent, this first section is important because that describes to the seller what my agency as the seller's agent will be with you, the seller. Talks about the fact that, and in simple terms, my agency with you as a seller is that I am not going to say or do anything that will impact your ability to sell this house quickly and to sell it for as much money as we can get for it. All right? We're going to discuss pricing here in a little bit, but the fact is that I have to be very careful if I'm the seller's agent. Sorry, still go back one on this. If I'm the seller's agent, I'm not going to say anything to the buyer's agent. I'm not going to have conversations within my office saying, oh, I've got to sell it, that they've got to sell this and they've got to sell it now. And they probably accept $2,000 less than this amount, all right, or $20,000 less than this amount. Because by me doing that, now I've hurt my seller, correct? Okay. The other thing is, and there's a fine line here, that if in the process of me listing this house, the seller tells me, I don't know, that they've had a continuous plumbing problem. The sewers always are backing up. Okay. And then they say to me, well, I don't want to tell anyone. And then you say, well, you shouldn't tell me. Okay. So if someone starts going into, if they start saying, listen, I want to tell you something about the house, but I don't want it made public. That's where you stop the conversation, okay? Because at that point, you don't know. But if you go, okay, what is it? And you let them tell you that the sewers are backing up and they haven't been able to fix it. Now, all of a sudden, you're stuck in the middle and you're going to have to disclose it if they won't. You're going to have to put it in your ABIT.
Would it still be an issue that you know that there's something wrong but you don't know what it is? Did you start the conversation?
No, because at that point in time, when you're just starting a conversation. It could be that they have every summer they have ants. Okay, you have ants. So you don't, and I'm not trying to be sneaky and hide things, but if you want to stop it, because if it is a big deal, you say, you know what? You keep telling me about this, now you've told me this, we have to disclose it, and you have to disclose it. And realistically, you, as a good agent, you want to make sure your seller is aware that the risk of not telling is that because when the seller doesn't disclose something, and then the buyer finds it out, which more than likely they're going to turn around and they're going to sue the seller. All right? And then the seller is going to, there's a real big problem when non-disclosure in real estate is a huge deal. All right? So you want to make sure your sellers are above board and not hiding stuff. It's in their best interest. All right? But where I don't want you guys to be is I don't want you to be sucked into the middle of this situation where you know something and now you're not saying it. Because if you're not saying it, the seller's going to, or the buyer's going to sue the seller. And then the buyer's going to sue you and the brokerage also. They're going to do that anyways. But the fact is, then through your records and so forth, it's going to come out that you knew about. Somehow you're going to get caught and dragged in. But if you can show that you can prove that you didn't know this stuff, then you're going to be fine. Okay? All right. So, that is what you're going to do as agency in the simplest form to the seller. As when you're talking to the seller, you want to go into agent representing both sides. And this is the first time and multiple times I'm going to point this out to you, and that is, if I talk to the seller now, and say, you know, there's a possibility that an agent or a buyer is going to come to me directly. They're going to either see the sign out in the front yard, or because your listing is going to be on the internet, Zillow or wherever else you may be, the buyer may come to me and say, I'd like you to write an offer for me. All right. So you have to set this up in the seller's mind, because if the first time the seller's hearing about this is when you're presenting the offer, they're probably going to dig their heels in, and they're probably going to get concerned, okay? Because, first of all, there's a certain group of people that are going to be concerned that you can't give them good representation on both sides, all right? And there is a risk, so you have to be, if you're dual ending and you're taking care of both sides, you have to be very careful. You're standing on this fence, and every conversation you have to think of, okay, how far can I go on discussion, okay? Now, if I'm a buyer's agent or a seller's agent and I don't represent the other side, I mean, I can go and not worry about that. I'm protecting my seller, I'm protecting my buyer, and I can go at the other side with everything and every tool I can find, all right? So and where this is going to show up is early negotiations on price and the contract, and then on request for repairs. And then it may come up if you have a lender that's moving slowly and we're not getting ready to close on time, okay? So if I've had that discussion with the seller, and the sellers are, oh, okay. And you may there may be a conversation too. The seller says, well, if you're representing both sides, are you going to give me a discount on commission? It's a fair question. And if you decide that that's something you want to do, that's something that you can note in the listing agreement. Okay, by having this conversation now, the seller, it's in the seller's mind. If you never bring in a buyer, that's fine. But if you bring in a buyer, you say, you remember, we talked about this in the listing appointment, that I might find a buyer and I might bring a buyer into you. Well, I've got one, I'd like to present an offer, and it should go smoothly because you've already had the conversation. And the seller, because you've done a great job of explaining the agency and made the seller feel comfortable that you're going to represent the seller and you're not going to cross any boundaries, then you should be fine, okay? Now, very honestly, I think the seller gets the better representation anyways in dual agency, because if I didn't have the seller, we wouldn't be talking about anything here, right? Okay? So I kind of owe the seller for this whole commission, this whole deal. So I think as an agent, I tend to lean, and maybe I'm putting my own words into this, but I think I tend to be more leaning to the side of the seller because the seller was my first portion of this transaction. Okay? Do you have a question?
Well, I was kind of interesting because I had just that exact scenario with a seller not that long ago, and one of the things that I learned from that experience was when we do listing presentations from then on is to explain very thoroughly to the seller that you are paying me 5% that I'm then splitting with a buyer's agent. You're not paying me 2.5% and the buyer's agent 2.5%.
Yes.
Because they came back and it took me a long time to explain to them that, but just because we actually ended up not double-ending it, but when we were negotiating with someone who came straight to us, the seller right away was like, well, then I only pay half the fee, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, no, but, you know.
But that's where again, you have the conversation at the time of listing, you know, but you are correct about the whole point about you're paying me 5% or you're paying me 6%, and then I'm going to give a portion of my commission to the buyer's agent on the other side, okay? And then the question comes up if I'm double lending it, which is what we're talking about here, then, I mean, and you can't hide it, you have to flat say, then I would get the whole commission.
Well, that's what we did that. So
Yeah.
we always explained what these
Yeah.
disclosures are, but, you know, sometimes people will,
So just setting the expectations.
Yes, and this is what everything we do in this business is we have to set expectations, we have to explain to them that our clients things that may or may not happen, and we don't want to sound like Chicken Little and the sky's falling. But at the same time, it's important that we have those conversations because we're the professionals, we're the experts, okay? Your clients, and I read an article where we're looking at people on average are only selling their houses, I think, every 11 years now, okay? So the chances are that most people don't remember what it's like to sell a house, okay? And because of that, you have to train them, even though, yeah, I've sold 3 houses in my life. Well, yeah, but you haven't sold a house in 11, 12 years. The world's changed, okay? So it's important that we have those discussions, and it's important that we do our job as an agent to let them know all these things, because then we have to assume that that our clients don't know. All right? And you don't treat them like a 2-year-old, but at the same time, you say, hey, we need to have these conversations so that we're all on the same page. All right? And you can do that in ways that don't scare the hell out of your clients. Okay? All right, and then you're going to go ahead and, in this case, because it's a listing, you're going to be checking the seller box, having your seller sign. make sure that every time your clients sign anything that they date it. Dates are very critical when it comes to contracts because it shows when this happened, all right? So let's say you only signed here, but then the only place that you had a date was the RPA. And then you get an argument over conversations. They say, well, you didn't give this to me when we did the listing, it was later. Okay. And I'm nitpicking, but the date is what shows it's all on the same thing. And you can put in quick zip form, you can put the dates in. Don't. Let your clients sign and date, okay? Have it. Okay, I've signed and dealt with so many contracts over the years that I sign my name. If there's not a date line, I'm putting my date right after my name. Just by habit. All right? And it's a good habit to get in. All right, I beat that up too much. Let's move on. This is the second page, is all the codes that affect agency.
The first box on the first page, there's no need to worry about that. The leasehold now.
Yeah, unless it's a lease.
Okay.
If you're doing a listing for a lease, then you check that one. Okay, this is all the civil codes that go along with agency. You do not need to read this all to your seller, but I highly recommend that when you've gone through a contract and the seller doesn't want to read all of it, or has, maybe wants to kind of, even if they sign the agreement, you say, I want you to go ahead, I want you to read through this whole thing at your leisure. If you have questions, you're going to come to me with those questions, and I'm going to answer those questions. And I'm going to make sure that you're comfortable understanding what these documents say. Because there's a lot in here, okay? So, but they do have the right. I sat out in 100-degree heat in Rosamond in a house that had no power in it. And my buyer went and sat under a tree for 45 minutes and read the RPA. He had the right to do that. And I sure wasn't going to be me that was telling him, no, hurry up. All right? So if they want to do that, then they're going to, and he was an engineer, and he's the typical type that you're just going to wait for me, I'm going to review this stuff. And they got the right to do that. All right, next thing we hit is the PRBS, possible representation on more than one buyer or seller. Today we're talking about from the seller's point of view. My office has over 300 agents. There is a possibility that another agent may be talking to another homeowner in this tract with the same make and model of house as your house. And I'm not aware of that now, but it may come on the market soon after we sign this listing agreement. All right? I'm not aware of that, but I'm making you aware that there are possibilities of that. Okay? I mean, if I've done comps, so I know what's on the market now, and we'll discuss anything that's in your neighborhood, but I can't control what could be coming on the market in the future. All right. There may be conversations going on with other sellers right now in your neighborhood. Okay? And just because they're from my office does not mean that I'm aware of all the other conversations. All right? But understand that dual agency is not me representing both the buyer and the seller. Dual agency is you representing the seller and you representing the buyer. You're both under the umbrella of the brokerage, and that is dual agency. Dual agency, or agency itself, is at the broker level. All right? So that's why when you're writing an offer, and you're marking on your offer that the brokerage is Keller Williams Antelope Valley on the listing side, and then the buyer side is Keller Williams Antelope Valley. And then as soon as you once you mark, and the brokerage is representing the buyer and the seller, it's going to check all the boxes as dual agency. All right? Any other questions on these two agency documents? Okay. Make sure you understand too that in some of these documents, it's going to ask for the brokerage's license number, and then it's going to be asking for your license number also. So you're doing both. Okay, wire fraud. Basically, there's serious problems with wire fraud. In your conversation now with the seller, I think it's important to tell them, but you're going to want to have the conversation again when you getting ready to go into escrow, because we're listing it now. And we're telling them about wire fraud, and be careful about trusting information from escrow that's not coming directly from escrow. Okay? By the time we get into escrow, your sellers are going to have forgotten about this probably. So make sure you review this again when you get into escrow. And the buyer's putting an offer in, they better have the wire fraud advisory, so that when that document, when you're discussing the offer, you're going to remind your seller about it at that point in time also. All right. I don't want, because we kind of started late, I don't really want to beat up wire fraud too much unless anyone has a serious question about not understanding the risks. Okay. Basically, money that gets wired in gets wired to a fraud account. So your buyer's $80,000 deposit is gone, or your money that was your profits from the sale of your home gets fraudulently sent to someone else's account, not yours. Okay. All right, so now we're at the listing agreement. Okay, date prepared. This date prepared in the top left-hand corner is just that. It's the date you went into Zip Forms and you created this listing agreement. Okay, so you created on Monday, and your appointment is not till Tuesday. You still put Monday's date in there. What this does is that this plus the address of the property references and makes this an individual listing agreement. Okay? So if you do a modification of terms, which is an amendment to this in the future, you're going to be referring to the listing agreement on 2/13/2018 for 1234 Main Street. Okay, those two items are going to have, very likely are going to make it an individual document. And then when you do a modification to it or a reference to it, there won't be a question of which listing agreement you're doing now. And let's say for some reason, well, the easiest one is, let's say that we reach the expiration date of February 2018 and you let the agreement expire. Okay? And the seller says, oh no, we want to extend this. Well, once it's expired, you can't extend something that's expired. You can't just magically remake it happen. So you're going to be writing a new listing agreement. Okay? So now you're going to have a listing agreement that this date now is February 13th, 2019, let's say. Okay? For this address. Now we've made the original listing agreement and the new listing agreement different, and we can refer to them based on that. Okay, so now, sellers' names. Make sure the sellers' names are the way they own the property, okay? This is part of why we did the property profile, okay? Make sure you use those names. If it's a trust, then the name of the trust is going to go here as the seller. All right? Now, you're not going to be able to get the whole name of the trust in there in a lot of cases. The trust names can go on for days. So what you're going to do is the John and Jane Doe family trust, and get as much as you can get in there, and then it's just going to break it off. We have an additional form that's going to clarify that going forward. Okay. All right. I'm going to skip over the dates for a second. Make sure you have the address in here correct. And, okay, so everything else on this page, we got a beginning listing date, an ending listing date. The APN number should be in before you go to a listing appointment. You got the price, if you're going to be asking the seller to pay the additional $199 commission, and that can go here, all right? And then the commission amount, and this is what Frank was just talking about. Seller's going to pay me 6% commission. And then this point down here, item D, says that I'm going to give 3% to the buyer's agent. Okay. Now, there's multiple ways that you can fill this out before you go to a listing appointment. And one way is not wrong or right, it's just they're different, all right? The first thing you can do is you run all your comps and you say, okay, this house needs to list for $300,000. I'm going to put today's date when we're having the appointment as the beginning date, because I'm sure I'm going to get the listing signed. And then I'm going to put it out at 6 months or a year, whatever I feel it needs to be. Okay? And then I'm going to list that the seller is going to pay the additional $199, and then I'm going to get 6% commission, and I'm going to pay 3% out, or I'm going to pay 2.5% because I know I'm going to be spending extra time marketing this and so forth. So I'm going to pay 2.5 here, and I'm going to get 6%. And I can put all that in my listing agreement. And so when I walk into the appointment, I'm going to be going over all this with the seller. Okay? And a lot of people do this, and a lot of people are very successful doing it this way. The other way you can do this, and this basically boils down to personality and comfort type of the seller's agent. All right? Personally, I'm not comfortable having this all filled out, walking into a seller and saying to the seller, hey, this is what you're going to sell it for. This is, I mean, and you're not saying it that way, but you're having to, you better have a very good plan, and you better have your personality in order and your scripts in order so that you're selling this and the seller is convinced of every item down the road, okay? Because if not, the seller may start backpedaling if you're not careful. And I'm not saying it's a wrong way to go. Not at all. I'm just saying be sure you know what you want to do and how you want to approach it. To me, I walk in with all the item, with the price, beginning and end dates, the $199, and the commissions plain. And then I have my conversation. We talk about comps on the property. We agree to let the seller agree to a price, okay? And then we talk about commission, so that they understand what they're getting for the commission, and they understand that I'm going to be paying out what I'm going to be paying to the other side. This is not required, by the way. But I think it's bad business not to have that conversation, because why would you not tell your seller what the split's going to be? All right? Because they're gonna figure it out as soon as you go into escrow and they get the commission instructions that they're gonna be asked to sign. If all of a sudden your dollar amount is significantly more than the other side, they go, well, why am I paying you more? And you didn't tell me about it. That's kind of the same conversation we've had about other things that we will keep having. If you have the conversation up front, no one's gonna get excited. We already had the conversation. Okay? And then we'll go, then once we come to agreements on all of this, then we'll talk about the 199 and what the seller gets for that. Okay? And then we'll talk about the listing. We want to get this listed today. All right? And then we need 6 months listing on this to make sure that we, and it depends on the market.
So that's supposed to be an example of 6 months, but it's only a few days there than the example.
No, I'm just talking. It's not, those are numbers, I don't know what the heck they are.
It should say that.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, watch this, because it will do this too. You go in and it's gonna go to the same year, so if it pushes to the next year, you need to make sure that you manually change it. Okay, and this is a prime example of filling one out and me rushing and not paying attention to that.
How do you explain the 199? And it's like, should I say like fee or like code office fees versus the word commission?
Well, first of all, it's an additional commission, it's not a fee. All right? Because you can't have a buyer or seller agree. I mean, you can, but it really is truly a commission. They're agreeing to pay an additional $199 to have, for the record keeping, for the office to manage the files, to make sure that the brokerage has all the documentation and will have your documentation for the next 7 years in their system. So if you ever need anything, it's there for you. So if you lose all your documentation, the brokerage still will have it. But you better have a good script for that, and I'm not going to try to explain the script. Those of you that are in coaching, work with Drew on setting up a script that you are comfortable with and that you believe in, okay? And that you can basically spit out in your sleep, okay? Because this is the one that people are gonna, I know I used to trip all over it, okay? It's, you don't have to charge that, by the way.
I was about to say, we have
You
we
can
don't charge it, because
Yeah.
if someone pays me $7,000 or $8,000
Right.
to sell the house, I can eat the $199.
Well, the thing is, it depends on the market. When I started out in this business, we were lucky to have $200,000 sales prices, okay? And it starts getting kind of tight. And at that point in time, you start thinking about, and still, there's still $200,000 houses out there. Go out to Cal City, you're gonna find a $150,000 house. So at $150,000 in the commission you're getting on that, maybe
I
one.
correct myself, but yes, when we get under 200,000,
Yeah.
we charge it, and we charge it on all the hand sales.
Yeah.
Right.
So but again, you're all independent contractors. No one's gonna tell you the commission amount here. No one's gonna tell you you have to charge this to the seller. But what you are being told is that you're going to pay, you as an agent are gonna pay $199 per side for every transaction in the office, okay? And then at that point in time, that's your choice whether you're going to pay it or whether you're going to pass it to your clients, okay? And, people struggle with this, but there are agents charging $600. I've seen up to $1,000 charged, and the buyers or the sellers are agreeing with that, okay? And I'm not going to judge whether it's right or wrong. it's, you know, it's what you want to do, and what you, I don't wanna say get away with, but what you can justify to your clients, and your clients understand and feel that it's reasonable.
Well, it kind of depends on what you charge it for, because if I go ahead and say,
Right.
I wanna put your $1 million home in or whatever home
Right.
in a really fancy magazine that's gonna cost an additional $500,
Yeah.
then I can justify the expense.
Exactly. Okay, so, again, I beat the hell out of this, but the fact is that it's up to you guys what you're comfortable with, all right? And I'm trying to make sure, I don't want to push, I have a personality that makes me do things one way. But there's just as many or more personalities that allows them to do this other way. And there may be some happy medium where they do part of this, but not all of them, okay?
The 3%, is that your deciding factor, or is that the buyer's agent's deciding factor?
That's your deciding factor.
So what you're gonna pay the buyer's agent is based on.
So, and this number here is the number that you're gonna put in the MLS, okay? So you're gonna say, when it says, when you've got your listing signed, and then you go to enter in the MLS, when you're filling out information, it's gonna have the listing price, and then it's gonna be contribution or commission to buyer's side, okay? Buyer's agent side, okay? But yes, it's everything about the commission is your choice, okay? If, and I'm not suggesting you do this, if you can get away with 10% commission here, more power to you. The brokerage is not going to tell you the commission you should be charging, okay? You know, the fact is, you're not gonna, if you start overcharging commissions, the sellers are gonna figure that out. And there are some big lawsuits out there now where they're saying that all the brokers and everybody's got together and they're saying that 6% is what you should be charging. This is just traditional. That's all it is. Okay? This is not Keller Williams telling you to do this. This is not RE/MAX or anybody else. This is what you feel the market will accept. Okay? And there's some disclosures in here that specifically points out to the seller that this number is not set by the brokers or anybody else.
Well, there was that purple bricks company that just went down that specifically said they will not pay buyer's agents commissions.
Yeah. But part of what they're doing is they had a flat fee, and then once you got in, you found out it was a flat fee for a certain narrow range of properties. And then if you didn't fit in that range, then they'd start bumping you up, and by the time you were done, most of the transactions looked a lot like ours with the commission amounts. Okay.
Ken, in regard to the date prepared, that doesn't obligate you to have to, I have to put it in the MLS for a certain amount of time until you actually have
No.
a signature from the seller.
Right, the date prepared is purely the date that it was prepared.
Right.
The date that sets the time, the clock ticking, is the date that the sellers sign and accept this listing agreement. And now at that point in time, you have 48 hours to get this listing entered into the
So the new
MLS.
date that you're talking about after they sign would be the beginning date?
No, that will be the date on page 5 of this transaction.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you that.
Okay.
Okay? All right. The rest of this stuff, you just kind of read through. This item here on, it's important, and this may be a little old, but you can set in here the number of calendar, if your listing expires. You can put in here, it's for 60 days after the listing expires, and I am required as the agent to give you the list of client people that have been through the house. Okay? So let's say I have 20 people that have gone into the house and looked at it, okay? For 60 days afterwards, if any of those 20 people buy the house, the seller owes me the commission. Okay? That's to protect you from at the tail end of a listing where a seller has met one of the clients that came into the house and they said, well, you know what? This listing is expiring in 3 days. After it expires, let's get together, I'll sell this to you as a FISBON, we'll say, and I won't charge you as much commission. Instead of 3%, you know, or I'll pay you, instead of 2.5%, I'll pay you 3%, because the seller said, because I don't have to pay the seller agent at that time. Okay? So that's your way to protect yourself from a kind of an unscrupulous seller.
Is that a typical amount of days you would put?
Up to what?
Amount of days you would put, 30 days, 60 days?
I see about 3.
You know, it's all over the place.
Oh,
Yeah. Because you want enough time that, I mean, 30 days probably works fine. Because after that, the buyers that are going to come and do this are going to be in trying to get a contract signed fairly close afterwards. But I would probably go out at least 60 days. Maybe I'd go out 90 days, because how am I going to know that this occurred?
It's gotta be long enough for someone to not wanna wait for that.
It's got to be close of escrow, and it gets recorded, and then I have to be watching the address on the market to see when this property got sold. Okay, I won't be in my MLS, I'll be having to check property profile. It'd be a lot of work, I'm probably never gonna do it. But the fact is that if you really want to do it, you really felt like there was a client that was doing that, that would be how you do it. You'd watch the property profiles for that, and then when it got recorded, then you'd know. And then you'd go back and you'd have to sue the seller for commission. Okay?
Ken, you were mentioning about the 6%, you can even do it up to 10%, but you can't bring that number of commissions too low either, like 1% or 2% if you wish to without permission from
Right,
the.
good question, thank you. The office does have a minimum commission, and we require 2% commission per side, all right? Now, once you cap, you can do it for free, we don't care, because we're not gonna make any money off it anymore once you've got your cap. But until you've capped, all your transactions have to have a minimum of 2% for your side. So if you were to pay 3% here, the minimum you could go here would be 5%. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, if you want to go below that 2% amount, you go to the team leaders and you ask them for them to waive or reduce the commission down. Okay. Or the percentage down. And they may or may not do it. I can't speak to it. All right. I think we beat this up pretty good. Any other questions there? All right.
At what point do you point the gun to their head and tell them to sign?
Never. Okay. Item 4A. This talks about items that are included and excluded. Basically this. Now, what is included in the sale of real property?
The stove.
Stove, microwaves.
Yeah,
Attached.
fixed.
It's not specific items, it's attached, and it's housed, it has to be permanently attached.
TV wall mount.
Right, exactly, and that's the explanation I always use, is the bracket that's holding this TV on the wall is bolted into the wall. You can't just pick it up and remove it. The TV we can pick up and remove. So this is personal property, but the bracket behind it is real estate, real property. Okay. Curtain rods. are real property. The curtains attached to the curtain rods are personal property. Okay, and that is a spot that you can get in arguments with, and you need to clarify. Okay. So you're going to go ahead. Sometimes above ground spas are good. If someone has a above ground spa, even though it's not something you just pick up and haul off, it is personal property because the only attachment is the electrical, and you can unhook the electrical, and you can take the spa if you want. If not, then you want to make sure that you say that the spa is included, and then you want to make sure that you put in the MLS that the spa is included in the sale. Okay?
I'm assuming this is separate sheets that fill out all the items.
Not really, because there's not that many typically.
For excluded and included, for things that are attached? No?
Not really. So if you're taking the brackets off the wall, then you're going to say you're taking the brackets. But if you're taking the curtains, you tend to confirm that you're taking the curtains so that it's not confusing.
There's
Okay?
not like an items containing list.
And you can. I believe in this system, if you start typing here and type too much, it's going to go to an extra page by itself. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe. So, then we get to leased and liened items, solar systems, alarm systems, propane water softeners, but solar and alarm systems are your biggest, and then water softener. And these, if they have a lien, if they're owned outright, if the seller has paid off the loan on the seller, or the lien on the solar, you put in there that it's part of the transaction. Okay? Water softener and alarm. Then you think alarms, well, alarms are at least a little cheapo, they give them away free. What we're talking about are the alarm systems that you see advertised where you can watch on your phone the cameras in your house. Those are expensive. Those tend to have a $60 to $80 per month charge for them that you need to have the conversation with the seller. Are you taking this? Are you leaving it? If you're leaving it, we have to tell the buyer that it's here and that there's a value and they're going to have to take over the rest of the payments on it.
Yeah, like an RO system or a water filtration system or something.
Yes. Yeah. Anything that the seller's making payments on and they're not taking take it with them and continuing the payments on their own somewhere else. Okay. Now, that brings us to Patient Hero tax assessments. The state of California has come up with a system that a contractor can install solar panels, they can install new windows, they can repaint your house, new AC systems, all sorts of things, okay? And when they do that, then the seller signs an agreement that takes the cost of all that work, and instead of you making a monthly payment to a lender, you pay it on your taxes. And it becomes a special assessment on your taxes. Okay? Now, that's all fine and good, except for the wording in the PACE and the HERO programs. What they have is they create a lien, but they create a lien that is primary. Okay, and what that means is their lien goes in front of all other liens on the property, including the mortgage. Yeah. So, and I'm not sure how lenders deal with this, that when you've got a loan on your property, I'm not sure that it can go in front of an existing loan, but when you sell, I know for sure when you sell it becomes a primary. And the problem with that is, there's not a sane lender in the world that is gonna give you a mortgage on this property and allow anyone to be primary to them. They want to be number one, and if I'm the lender and I'm giving you $300,000, I expect to be number one on the list. If you default, I want to get my money first. I don't want anybody else getting a dime of it before me. Okay? But with the PACE and the HERO, so if there's $40,000 of PACE HERO tax assessments, that would go in front of, that 40 would have to be paid to the tax man, before the lender started getting their money. So what's going to happen is the lender's going to say, someone's got to pay those off, and we're not loaning you any money. Okay? So what you're going to see, if you pick this up, and this is a tough one when you're trying to figure it out, because you almost, if you sense after you've gone in and looked at the house, and I'm not suggesting you do this before you do your listing appointment, but let's say you see the solar, so you're going to have a conversation about the solar, and the seller's not going to tend to think about this. They're going to say, oh yeah, we did one of those things, but we just pay for it on our taxes. Okay? Alarms go up in your head, okay, we got a PACE or a HERO. Now I'm going to go back to confirm it. I don't need to grill the seller. I do want them as my client. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask the title company to run me a tax report. And on the tax report, these will come up as sometimes they'll name them as a PACE or a HERO. These are two separate programs. But they'll say tax assessment or special tax assessment. Okay? So, and you can drill down and find out if it's PACE or HERO. Yeah, it's their tax report. Okay. So, and then once you figure that out, you need to have the conversation with the seller about the problem. Which probably, some people will be aware of them, some won't. Say, this has got to be paid off for the seller, or we're not going to be able to get a loan on this. Okay. And then the seller goes, well, I don't have enough profit in this to pay that off. Okay. So then at that point in time, now you're going to have to put something in the listing that says the buyer to pay off will need to pay off the special assessment, or the buyer and the seller to split. Okay, but whatever it is, again, you want to make sure you get that in the MLS. It can be in the agent remarks. You don't put in the marketing side of it, but just put in the agent remarks so that everyone's aware going into it that this is going to have to be paid off, and that the seller is not willing to pay it all off. Typically, the seller's willing to pay it all off. But if they just had it done and they don't have enough equity in the house, then there may be a problem. Okay?
If the equipment is leased, is there a lien on the property, or did the company installing it take the equipment down if the buyer doesn't want it?
I think it kind of depends on what it is.
Like a water softener.
Water softener, I mean,
Every month.
right, maybe it just depends. I don't have a good answer for you on that, because you have to just do some research on what it is, okay? Alarm systems can be removed. The parts of the alarm system that are expensive can be removed. Okay, water softener, a little more of a pain in the butt, but it could be removed. Solar is more of a problem.
Wouldn't that just be something that the buyer has to pick up? It's just like taxes and this, like what I was saying.
If there's a, let's just do solar, because you can't move.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you put in the agent remarks, buyer to take over solar loan payments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of that stuff gets paid off with the seller too, but yeah.
It does, as long as there's enough equity to pay it off.
Yeah.
But you're going to run in your career, you're going to run into people that haven't been in the house long enough, they want to sell it for whatever reason, and they don't have the equity to pay all the bills. Okay? And the Pace and the Hero, the problem with the Pace and the Hero loans is that they can, they're so easy to get, and they can, you know, every contractor comes to your door says, you know, I can put you on a PACE program. Okay? So you just have to be careful right there. And I'm not being specific because I can't be, because every deal is different. All right? That's your biggest deal, is you have to find out what's going on in the transaction. And which leads me to really the crux of this is that as a realtor, you cannot be afraid to ask questions. You can't be timid. You have to ask the seller, you have to ask them these questions. If you're dealing with a buyer, you have to talk to them about financial stuff and all these questions. Because if you don't, there's this big area that no one's checking on, and it can take your deal that you worked your butt off on and throw it out the window. All right? So you have to have those conversations. You can't be timid. You have to have conversations.